So you're thinking of doing an Ironman branded 70.3 distance event in the UK, and you're trying to decide between Stafford and Weymouth. Well, this year I did both for the second time, and I'm going to go through the pros and cons of each across the swim, bike, run, and I'll let you know at the end which one I think you should be doing. A little bit of context of where I am as a triathlete, so you can decide just how much stock to put into what I say about both events. My first 70.3 was Stafford in 2019, and I did that around the 6 hour mark. I did get a puncher on the bike though, and then we did Weymouth in 2019 as well, a few months later. The swim was shortened, but if it hadn't been shortened, I probably would have hit around the 5:45 mark. So then fast forward 2 years and a shit ton of training. And now I typically finish around the high 4s or low 5s, depending on how tough the course was and how much time I decided to spend faffing in transition, just like Weymouth just gone. In general though, I do tend to be around the bottom 10% on the swim times, around the top 25% on the bike, and then sort of the top 10% on the run. So yeah, right, that's some basic stuff out of the way. Let's get into the swim differences. So the obvious key difference between the two events for the swim is the fact that Stafford is in a lake and Weymouth is in the sea. Now I guess a lot of people are probably going to think that I'll pick Stafford as the better or easier swim, but hold on. If you're like me and a bit of a slow but strong swimmer, you'd probably be able to go into a lake tomorrow and swim 3 or 4k no problem, you might actually be better off doing Weymouth. And the reason for this is that because of the salt water, you are going to be more buoyant in the water and hopefully or likely to have a much better position, a more streamlined position. And what you might find is that actually you're a few seconds per 100 faster. Weymouth just gone, I ended up having my fastest ever swim in a 70.3 despite my Strava saying that I did an extra 200 metres. Continuing with Weymouth, I actually think the swim entry is better for Weymouth as well, because you can just run into the sea as you would off any beach, whereas Stafford, you do have to jump off a pontoon at the end. And if you've seen any of my recent diving attempts, you'll understand why I've never opted to do this in a race.
Poolside, just makes oh my God.
I also think Weymouth is better from a spectator's point of view. It's obviously easy for them to stand in one location, see the swim start and swim end, but obviously also the entire course, whereas at Stafford, you're in a park and there's trees and bushes and stuff that does obscure some of the view. It's also a point to point. So if you're watching maybe the start, I don't know how difficult it would be to actually get to the finish of the swim, to actually watch whoever you're spectating on to actually get out. Now it's not all perfect for the Weymouth swim though, so here's some of the downsides of Weymouth. So if there is bad weather over the weekend in Weymouth, there's a good chance they're going to shorten the swim, if not cancel it altogether. They're not going to take that risk. So we had a shortened swim in 2019, we did the full one this year in 2021. The sea swims are generally more intimidating. I think a lot more people are scared about doing the distance in the sea over a lake, and you are also going to take on a hell of a lot of salt water as you breathe, as you get dunked, as you get battered throughout the swim, so nothing you can do about that. The biggest plus I think Stafford has over Weymouth in the swim is purely the course or the route that you have to do. I think because it's broken up into much smaller sections, I think it feels like it goes a lot quicker. Weymouth is basically just 3 long lines, and when you're a sort of slow swimmer like me, it does feel like it's taken an age and get a little bit boring. Whereas Stafford is sort of broken up into much more smaller, manageable chunks because you're turning every few hundred metres really. And obviously a lot more people will feel comfortable in the lake in Stafford. So overall, taking everything I've just gone through into account, I'm going to give the win here to Weymouth. Right, onto the bike. We're onto the bike now, and straight away I'm going to say that both bike courses are actually quite tough. Generally I was about 10 to 15 minutes slower across both these courses than I was at, say, the Cotswold 113 or Outlaw Half Nottingham. Stafford is anywhere between 700 to 800 metres of climbing, and Weymouth is 900 to 1,000, depending on what you look at. My bike computer came back with 1,000 metres, over 1,000 for Weymouth. And again, you might hear that and actually think that Weymouth is the tougher course as it's got more climbing, but it's not quite that simple. The best example of this is actually in the descents. So for some more specific data, I'm actually going to compare a couple of them. So I'm going to compare the 20 kilometres from T2 in Stafford and then the 20 kilometres off of Revels Hill in Weymouth. So during that descent from T2 in Stafford, I averaged 190 watts, which gave me an average speed of 34 kilometres an hour. Bear in mind this is a descent. And the reason for that is it's actually quite technical. There's a lot of sharp turns, a lot of stopping. I think that's where a lot of the warning signs are and stuff like that. However, in Weymouth, coming off of Revels Hill for the next 20 kilometres, I also averaged 190 watts. But this time I hit an average speed of 40 kilometres. As you can see, although there's a lot more hills in Weymouth and a lot more average climb, you do actually get a reward off each of those hills. Weymouth does tend to have shorter, sharper climbs, whereas Stafford, I think any of the climbs there just tend to be longer drags. And like I say, you're not rewarded with anything coming off the top of them. Even though you're on a descent, you don't tend to go very fast off them. In terms of overall road conditions, Weymouth again wins this hands down. I was genuinely surprised at how good the roads were, and they're not the entire way. There's long stretches where you're actually in some like sort of foresty area with tree canopies over the top. The roads were pretty bad there, but in general the roads were actually pretty good. Weymouth roads were not good. I mean, I've ridden on worse courses. Outlaw Nottingham half is the worst 90 kilometres of roads I've ever ridden on, but Weymouth was better than Stafford. Now, another little advantage that Weymouth has is that the beginning and end is actually very easy to get going. So as soon as you leave your transition, you're actually onto quite a nice wide road and you can get your head down and just get cracking. You do a hit hill quite early on, but it's a lot easier to start. Whereas in Stafford, you come out of transition in the park and you're greeted by, I think, like a dozen speed bumps. That it's almost like it's a kilometre stretch that's been designed to throw every single thing off your bike as quickly as possible. And even if you manage to avoid all of the ejected bottles, which is quite difficult along that stretch, the next sort of part of Stafford as well is quite difficult. That's when you hit the country lanes, which are covered in gravel, horse crap, tree cuttings. You can't really see very far ahead of yourself a lot of the time, so there's a lot of sharp turns. I watched some guy just fly into a bush because he misjudged a corner. The best bit of Stafford is when you come into the dam. I think it is over the reservoir. So you do a nice little descent into that and then you can see quite far away. So it's quite a nice little section that is, but it doesn't compare to the descent, the near 30 kilometre of descending that you get to do off of Revels Hill from 60 kilometres in basically to the end. The scenery there and I mean, on the trip back to Weymouth is absolutely unreal. It was great fun. We had perfect weather this year, but one little or small downside for Weymouth is that I think it does come up slightly long. It's about a mile or maybe 2 kilometres long. It's nothing major or anything, but even taking that into account, I went 6 minutes faster in Weymouth with more climbing on the same average power than I did over Stafford, so it shouldn't really cost you anything. So again, taking all of that into account, I'm going to give the win here to Weymouth again. So it's not looking too good for Stafford, and now we're about to get onto the run. I think it's going to get even worse. Right, so now we're on to the final part, the run, and I'm just going to come out and say this from the off. Stafford is not going to win this one either. If you've not heard of the castle section or castle part of the Stafford half marathon off the bike, you're very lucky. Because it is absolutely brutal. It is an incredibly steep hill that you luckily get to do twice. Now over in Weymouth, where they've altered the course slightly, it's very slightly different from previous years. It's actually a very, very fast half marathon course. It's almost completely flat. The biggest difficulty with Stafford is on the way up to the castle climb, which you do twice, like I said. You also have a long drag as well, probably at least a kilometre or two that leads up to it. So it just slows your average pace down again even further. And the issue with coming down the other side of the castle is that it's so severe, it's literally going to smash your quads to pieces, which have already been smashed to pieces on the tough Stafford bike course. So it's just relentless. It's absolutely horrific. But both run courses do have amazing support along the way. They're both sort of town centre based, so you do get a lot of people along the run course. Weymouth overall I do think is better in terms of support, just because I think it's a lot easier for people to get to the entire run route or the entire run course, whereas there are parts of Stafford where you're sort of running around roads and stuff that don't really have people on. Now I will give 1 point to Stafford though. The finish line there is actually the better of the two finish lines. I think, like I say, because they're both town centre based, but Stafford is right in the town centre, the finish line. The Weymouth finish line is actually down the one end of the beach, so it's a little bit out of the way. Whereas in Stafford, I think you're surrounded by so many more people, and you just have people who are just out doing their normal day-to-day business supporting you. Whereas Weymouth, I think that finish line is only really people who are waiting for their people to come over the line. But like I said earlier, Stafford does not win the run part. Weymouth wins this section as well, purely because the course is a lot faster, it's flatter, it's easier, it's got more support along the way. Stafford's run course is very, very tough. I wouldn't even like to do it as a solo half marathon, just as a half marathon event. I think even then it would be a tough task. Just a few final things as well to note that shouldn't really be factors into whether you do one or the other. But Stafford is split transitions, so what that means is that you'll swim and start your bike in one location and then run in another once you bite to it, which makes the Saturday the day before quite logistically difficult and annoying. It also means that in the morning on the Sunday you'll probably be on a shuttle bus that can take 40 to 45 minutes, so you'll need to factor that into your wake up time in the morning. Time of year can actually be a big factor as well, because Stafford is in July and you're very much more likely to get a heat wave. So this year in 2021 it hit 33 degrees on the run, and I think even in 2019 it was 25 plus. So this year I didn't even make an attempt to go fast on the run. I think I did a 1:41, whereas I'm normally around the 90-minute mark, so the 1:30s. So you can see how much that affected my time overall. One of the issues that may affect Weymouth is to do with the swim, in that it might be shortened. So in 2019 it looked a bit dodgy in the sea on the Saturday, so I think they shortened the swim, but I think that might have happened on other years as well. I'm not 100% sure about that, but there is a higher chance that if you turn up at Weymouth, the swim might be shortened or cancelled completely. And can you really count it as a full 70.3 or a half Ironman if you've not done the full distance? Right, so if you haven't figured it out yet, the one course of these two that I would recommend that you do is, drum roll, Weymouth. It is still a tough course, but it is actually a fun course as well. So yeah, I would highly recommend doing Weymouth. I'd love to do it again. I don't think I'll be doing Stafford again after having done it twice, but Weymouth I would look forward to doing again. And just to summarise Weymouth, I think the swim you can potentially go faster on, purely because it's in the sea. The bike is hilly, but the hills are short and sharp, and you do get a reward of a nice descent off every one of them. And then the run is completely flat and is incredibly well supported along the whole way. So yeah, overall, like I say, I'd pick Weymouth. So I hope that has helped you in your decision-making process between Ironman Stafford and Ironman Weymouth. I could also have compared these two events to other ones such as Outlaw Half, Cotswold 113, Grafman, the Immortal Half, all that sort of stuff. But I know that some people just purely want to do an Ironman branded event, and there's nothing wrong with that. They are great events, but there are other events available that you could also do that might be quicker and easier. But that's it for now, and I will see you in the next one. The next one, I have no idea what I'll be doing, so we'll see you then. Bye.